Good evening and welcome once again to Fired Up. I'm your host for the show, Bob Irwin. We are coming to you live from the gun store here in beautiful Las Vegas, Nevada. This show is about guns, related politics, and self-defense issues. We are on Fired Up is on radio on KSHP 1400 AM and on YouTube simultaneously. If you go to YouTube on your computer, something on the broadcast, on the radio, you can find us on YouTube. The shows are up that go back to years and years. We may be changing our time on the radio shortly. We're looking at a different time frame for YouTube, for the radio to broadcast our show. So if you tune in next week at 5 to 6 and we ain't there, call the gun store and ask them where we are, because we may change time slots on KSHP. I would appreciate that. So we didn't just disappear. We'll be there somewhere. If you have a question or comment about any of our rants here, you can send a text to Bob at Fired Up Mail. Tell him one of these signs up here, and we will answer your questions by email to everybody. We respond to everything. My guest tonight is firearms instructor Lenny Davis, who most of you know if you're familiar with the show. Lenny, if you do a little bit of your background, that would be cool.
Sure. Like Bob said, I'm Lenny Davis. I'm a retired special agent with Department of Homeland Security. I just spent the last 8 years as a contract instructor for the State Department's Anti-Terrorism Assistance Program. And now I'm the director of training facilities for a company called Techstratics International in the Las Vegas area.
Okay. Train counterterrorism teams.
We're going to be training everybody.
I do want to make a little disclaimer here. We run self-defense shooting cases for the education of our listeners. We generally don't use the names, and usually use the state for general purposes to let you know where the incident took place. And we use good ones and bad ones and in-between ones to let our listeners who have a gun in their home or carry a gun for self-defense look at what happened and discover if they were in that same situation. Just as an example, what they should do right, what they should do wrong, or what they did wrong. Our listeners outside the Las Vegas area are about 4 times what the listeners are in Las Vegas. So we use cases from all over the country. For their general principle, we are not telling you that a case we use here that we say is a good shooting in Nevada wouldn't necessarily be a good shooting in Alabama or New York City or so forth. They're in general terms, because obviously we can't do each case by how the state law in that state would affect the case. Just general common sense things to keep you out of prison and keep you out of lawsuits. I'm later on in the show, right after we do a couple of shooting cases, we're going to be talking about the magazine ban supposedly forwarded by Sheriff Joe Lombardo. He's caught a lot of flack over it. I've talked to the sheriff about it. I've got lots of information about what's really going on. We'll get that right after we do a couple of cases. If you're concerned about the magazine ban that supposedly is coming to Nevada, we'll be on that in about 15 minutes and give you an update of real world, what's really not and what really is happening. I want to start out though with it just really popped. We had a couple of Uber drivers involved in shootings recently, and we've had some here that have been attacked here in Las Vegas. The first story, this is from CBS Miami TV4 on the 18th in Adventura, Florida, which is kind of a crossways resort area between the airport and actual Miami. Anyway, an Uber driver picked up a passenger around 5:30 in the morning on Sunday morning last, while he is driving to the airport on the causeway, a Dodge Caravan cut him off and shoved him kind of into the side of the causeway while he's westbound towards Sunny Isles Beach, and it was right next to the Adventura Mall. After coming to a stop, a man came out of the caravan with two handguns, both pointing them, drawn in an attempt apparently to rob the driver and the passenger. This is like poor television. The guy comes out with two pistols.
I've got two guns, one for each of you.
Anyway, the Uber driver, who has not yet been identified by police and probably won't be, has a license to carry a concealed firearm and had his own weapon. He drew it and fired at the robber. The person who had been in the passenger seat of the robber's vehicle jumped into the driver's side and then sped away. Police say there were two people in the caravan as it fled. So this was the driver who jumped out with the two guns. Then the guy in the right front passenger took his place, and somebody in the back seat, apparently along for the ride, took off. They fled the scene. As of this writing, the police were searching for the two. I think there was some information later. One of them may have been caught. The armed robber, the guy with two guns, was pronounced dead at the scene when paramedics arrived. The Uber driver and his passenger were taken to the police station for questioning. The Uber driver had a permit to carry his gun and is not expected to face any charges. There was a note, traffic in the area was in gridlock. I didn't need to put that in. The Sun Sentinel, a local paper there, updated this story on 12/21, yesterday or the day before, that the 29-year-old Uber driver will not face charges in this incident. This is really the Wild West. This is movie crap.
You expect me? I went through the early 80s in Miami in the narcotics enforcement world. I know what Miami's like. This is standard issue Miami. I love a story with a happy ending.
Yeah.
You know, the Uber driver defended the life of his passenger from an obvious armed robber who was not very good at his craft, and he's removed him from the gene pool, which is,
And this is just a great example of self-defense. It's a clearly perfect shooting. Guy's coming at you with two pistols and it ran you off the road, etc. A good shoot all the way. Perfect self-defense by the driver, which led me to kind of figure out, do all Uber drivers carry? And before that, we had another story come in on the 19th in between this robbery and the police saying the guy is not going to face charges. This is WVUE Fox 8 in New Orleans, reported on the 19th. The New Orleans Police Department is investigating a 1:30 a.m. attempted carjacking. An Uber driver picked up a passenger from the Ritz-Carlton just after midnight. He stopped at a red light on North Rampart Street. A 28-year-old suspect got out of a silver sedan next to him with a gun, ordering the driver and the passenger to get out of the vehicle. As the driver got out of the vehicle, he grabbed a pistol off the car door that was in the car door rack, and fired on the robber, fired several shots. Unfortunately, there was a local guy who worked at a hotel standing nearby behind the area on the sidewalk, got hit. He was hit in the hand, and he's taken to the hospital for treatment. He's okay. The suspect fled the scene, but jumped back in the car, fled the scene, crashed his car, attempted to flee on foot, but at that point, of course, it's 1:30 in the morning. The cops are sliding in from all directions. They got the guy, and they have announced that the driver will not be charged in this shooting, which caused me to start calling people to see if Uber drivers are allowed to carry guns, and my esteemed associate here did some research on that. So whether they're allowed to carry and how they're treated, if they're treated like 7-Eleven clerks, you pull a gun, you're fired. Where are they at?
Well, they're basically at, if Uber leaves it up to the state. So if the state says here in Nevada, if you go through the course and you get your CCW, you can carry your concealed weapon with you while you're working for Uber. They do not have a policy that strictly prohibits it, unlike I think Lyft does have one.
Lyft does. I was able to find that out abruptly, that Lyft's drivers are not.
And I don't know how that's going to be affected with the potential that Uber and Lyft, there's a big thing here in Nevada that Uber and Lyft are going to come under the taxi cab authority, or need to come under the taxi cab authority. And I don't know how that's going to affect it. But as of right now, Uber does not have a policy that says you can't carry your gun if you're legally certified to do so.
So right now, if you're an Uber driver, you can carry a gun if you have a CCW or whatever.
Yes.
I mean, you don't need a permit to carry a gun in a vehicle here in Nevada anyway.
Right.
So one would assume that lets the Uber drivers carry it anyway.
Right.
And we understand that Uber policy says that, and Lyft's policy doesn't. I wouldn't assume that Lyft drivers are unarmed. However, if you're a robber,
how many times have you heard of a taxi cab driver who's been carrying a gun?
We don't allow taxi cab drivers generally to carry firearms. Trying to confirm that with the taxi authority today was literally impossible, because, as Lonnie said, we've got this thing in the middle right now that the taxi cab authority is being reorganized because they've had lots of problems and some laws are changing, and it's all up to the legislature, which doesn't meet until February. So we may not have a clear answer on that, but there we are. I want to digress toward the end of the show, first off, and talk about this article. There was an article in the Sun, an editorial a week ago, that said that Sheriff Joe Lombardo was agreeing with the writer in the Sun, Mr. Greenspun's paper, that we needed to restrict high capacity magazines in Nevada without high capacity being defined. I've known Sheriff Lombardo for a number of years, and right after this appeared, I ran into him actually at a Christmas get-together at somebody's house. Walked in, and having tried to call him, and I wrote him a note, about this, what happened, and are you really doing this? I find that hard to believe. And before he got the email from me, I walked into it face to face. So we had a bit of a chat about that. I made sure that he got the email that I had sent, which he did the next day, and it got through the filter to get to his office. You understand, he's a guy that gets 1,000 emails a day, and other people sort through them for him. Obviously, he couldn't do anything but read emails if he read them all himself. So he has a filtering system there. Anyway, and Joe wrote back, for the record, in response to your questions regarding my recent comments in the Las Vegas Sun. First, let me be clear that the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department is not seeking any legislative proposals to limit or restrict firearm magazine capacity. The only proposed change in the law we are pursuing this session that deals with firearms is an amendment to current CCW statutes that allow applicants to submit their applications with an electronic signature. We believe this change would be more efficient, allow us to utilize modern technology and speed up the application process. I'm assuming, looking at the process, that's for renewals, because you'd have to be fingerprinted for the initial one, which obviously you can't do. Maybe you can do it over the internet. I know so little about computers. Maybe I'm wrong on that. Anyway, he went on, and there's some personal stuff here, but that he was one of the original backers of not having question one pass, the universal background check, eliminating gun registration in Clark County, etc. He's done a lot for gun owners. He is a gun owner. His one comment that he actually was quoted in the Sun was to say that nobody needs a 100-round magazine to defend their house. Everything else in that article in the Sun was hyperbole that was thrown in by Greenspun's newspaper, and Bloomberg's, the guy that wrote the article, just took everything out of context. I have checked now, and there is no bill draft pending in the legislature to restrict magazine capacities at all. That doesn't exist. The police department is not backing it. Joe Lombardo is not backing it. The article in the Sun was basically all a bunch of crap. It has been part of a call for a recall election for Sheriff Lombardo. There are some groups that don't like the way he's running the police department for whatever reason. I got lots of groups who don't like the way I run the gun store too, so I'll sympathize them with that. Sit in my desk for a week and maybe you'll change your mind. Anyway, I don't want to touch on that issue. It has nothing to do with gun rights. Joe Lombardo is pro-gun. This article is complete crap. And if you are signing a petition to repeal the sheriff based on him trying to restrict gun magazines, don't sign it. I also spoke with my good friend Don Turner of the Nevada Firearms Coalition. He sent, when the article appeared, his lobbyist went up and talked to the lobbyist for LVMPD and reported the exact same response from Sheriff Lombardo, that almost word for word, that what are you talking about? I'm not trying to restrict magazine sizes, neither is the police department. This is all crap. There you have it, the update. Questions may be directed to, I hate to see that when somebody is that misquoted. It just,
after looking at the article, I read the article and I was shocked. I know Joe also, and for a lot of years, and I was really shocked when I first read it, because I was like, Joe, come on, really? And then, looking back at it, I started to read the article and the words, that, he was quoted at one section saying that he was an avid hunter and that he sees no practical application for anyone to have a high capacity magazine. My first thing was to say, Joe, you really? And then I also looked back, and Bob and I spoke before I was going to come on the show, and I started doing a lot of research, trying to see if there was there's a lot of anecdotal evidence, if you will, put out by mostly the anti-gun side of the house about, if a guy's only got a 10-round magazine, you can't do a mass shooting. I tell you right now, I can train some people very quickly to be able to change 10-round magazines out to where, you're not going to have as many rounds before you have to change mags. But the reality of it is there's been no empirical data whatsoever, and anything that I could get my hands on. And I even went to a friend of mine and I got the State Department's curriculum for the responding to active shooter incidents. There's a lot of data in there. The reality of it is, with active shooters, folks, is not the fact that the guy's got a 100-round magazine, or he's got a bunch of 30-round magazines, which are not really high capacity magazines. A 30-round magazine is standard magazine for an AR-15 sporting rifle. That's been the standard mag for many years. But the reality of it is, it's really and truly just someone's impression that, again, they don't train with weapons. I've been a firearms instructor since 1980 for both the Treasury, the Department of Homeland Security, State Department. I've never seen this where, oh, he had mass magazines. Just before we came on the air, we were talking about the San Bernardino shooting last year, the terrorist incident in San Bernardino. Yeah, it's not workplace violence, folks. It was a terrorist incident. Those two people, between the two of them, shot, I believe, 68 rounds at the police. And the police, the San Bernardino County SWAT team, fired over 400 rounds at them when they were finally taken down in their vehicle. Now, of course, they were hiding in the vehicle, and vehicles are notoriously hard to penetrate, especially with the 5.56 rifles that the SWAT team was issued. Eventually, they did move, and they got killed. That they needed, and I'm sorry, folks, you can take me at my word, they needed killing. But you know, the whole reality of it is, I look back at data, and I've been crunching data for 2 weeks, going through everything I get my hands on, and nobody's done a study that comes out and says that a high cap magazine is going to, you know, banning them is going to make you safer. We went through the assault weapons ban in 1994 to 2004. There was empirical data on that. Crime did not go down. You didn't have this huge drop in gun crimes or shootings or anything else. The assault weapon is used in, I believe, less than 0.1% of 1% of all the shootings that happen. Handguns, yes. Most people are killed with handguns. Am I banning handguns? Hell no. I think if you're a criminal in the city of Chicago and you have a handgun, I mean, they've killed over 700 people this year in Chicago.
We already have data on that. Do background checks, stop crime with guns. Look at Chicago.
Yeah.
I mean, it takes 2 men and a boy a year and a half to legally get a handgun in Chicago, and as he said, they're up over 700 incidents this year. The mayor is pulling his hair out trying to figure out why this is not causing crime to stop. It's because criminals don't obey the law. That's why we call them criminals. Taking magazines or guns away from honest citizens does zero to reduce crime. Taking magazines away from citizens does zero. And I know Lenny is training fit young men who are part of SWAT teams and things.
Well, and I train civilians too. And
we look at our CCW classes, and the average age is probably up around 50 now, and don't have the dexterity to be changing magazines in the dark. Not that they'll even remember to do that. Giving some middle-aged person who doesn't practice with his gun for a living, we tell them to, but of course they don't. They're not going to be able to change magazines in the dark if they don't hit well when somebody breaks into their house, and they won't hit well when someone breaks into their house. People trained to hit well, like the San Bernardino SWAT team fired 400 rounds. I don't want to pick on them, but
no, and I was just going to say that I've worked with the SBSO's SWAT team, and they're a phenomenal SWAT team.
And how does giving a honest citizen a 15 or 20 shot magazine in their Glock pistol they keep in their house cause crime? There is no relationship between magazine capacity and crime. When this article came out, we're back to Lombardo, there were a lot of the county sheriffs, were asked about it, the other counties, and they all said, we don't want this because we're not going to spend our law enforcement hours stopping people and counting shells in their magazines, which is the same thing that happened in other states that have those restrictions. It's a waste of police resources. And you're going to take an honest citizen in front of a jury and say, this guy's committed a crime. He had 11 rounds in his pistol magazine in his glove box, and we're going to put him in jail?
Well, look at,
Give me a break.
look at the People's Republic of California. Come July 1st of next year,
Yeah.
you cannot own a magazine that holds more than 10 rounds for anything. The California Department of Justice came out, was it last week that they just came out with the,
Yes.
oh, you're digging for it. They came out with
Well, I
their
have an update on that one too.
Oh, do you? Well, then
Yes.
I'll let you speak.
So let's go back to
Not that
that.
it's your show or anything.
Also, because it came up now, and now is a good time. The California Department of Justice, because they did pass their ballot initiative, which Sonny was talking about, that effective on the 17th or on the 1st of July 2017, would require everyone to remove any large capacity magazines from the state. And they're talking 10 round here. Sell any large capacity magazine to a licensed firearms dealer, or destroy it and turn it into the government, or surrender it to the nearest law enforcement agency. And I added, if that happens July 1st, you can surrender it to the gun store in Las Vegas. We'll take care of it for you.
Or Lenny Davis.
My show. Now, that is scheduled to take place July 1. All the grandfathered magazines are gone. There will be contraband on July 1 if you haven't disposed of them or smashed them or turned them in. The NRA, following up on this, discovered on the 16th of this month, the California Department of Justice was provided notice of proposed regulations relating to magazines capable of holding more than 10 rounds. Included are changes in the requirements for obtaining and maintaining a large capacity magazine permit. This is a new regulation going into effect from the California Department of Justice on January 1. It requires that if you have such a magazine, you have to have a large capacity magazine permit. It calls for outlawing large capacity conversion kits, where you have something you can add to the bottom of your magazine to make it bigger. How you must permanently alter any magazine you have to accept no more than 10 rounds. It also eliminates possession of multi-tube shotgun designs. We have a lot of combat shotguns now with 2 magazines, tubes that it alternately feeds, so it holds more rounds. It also said in there you can't have a shotgun that holds more than 5 rounds in the tube. The regulations have been submitted under California's Emergency Rulemaking Act, which means they become effective 17 days after they were published, which was 12/16 of 16, meaning July 1st.
January 1st or July 1st?
January 1st. So actually, by regulation, they are moving this July 1 date up to January 1st. That is 6 days, 7 days from now. The problem is that California, if you're buying a gun that has any gun, you have a 10-day waiting period. So unless you already bought the magazine or the gun magazine that you're hearing about now, you can't possibly receive it before the law's in effect, therefore you can't receive it. So you're already in California prohibited from buying these, because the regulation says even if the process of you obtaining it is already in process, you have to receive it before January 1. Jesus. So there's a lot of detail on this. This is about a 28-page single-spaced bill, but it isn't a bill. It is a regulation that the agency, the California Department of Justice, under their laws, is allowed to put in, because they make regulations.
Mm-hmm.
for anybody to sue to stop this thing, it's already too late, because how are you going to get it into court?
Yeah, you're not.
You might have a court hearing on it 3 months from now. They're trying. The California pro-gun groups and the NRA and National Shooting Sports have all filed for an immediate stop to this, but they don't have a court date before January 1. So basically on January 1, they can start making arrests in California for having a large capacity magazine, meaning more than 10 rounds, without a permit to have one. It's a special permit they're making. They don't even have the permits yet if you want to get one. So you're basically screwed in California. There will obviously be massive violation of this because nobody knows it exists. It just snuck in under the press by, we've changed some regulations, and here they are in the middle of a registry of something California DOJ put out, upcoming changes for next year in regulations. You know, it's like 9 million pages long, and this is in the middle of it. Nobody knew it was there. I have no idea how enforcement's going to go. We may be in for an interesting time over there in California. Fortunately, in Nevada, as from the previous story, apparently we're not going to go through that here. So
have we heard?
I don't know what to tell you. I mean, we don't have enough information even how to get around this thing.
Have you seen any potential bills to ban assault weapons?
In California, yeah. There's
no, in California.
I'm
talking here in Nevada.
Not yet, but there may be one in a bill draft. It won't pass. The governor will veto it if they do pass it, and it requires more people to pass it. Then they're going to run into. Not all Democrats are anti-gun, and so the numbers are on our side. As Lenny said, assault weapons or military-style rifles are used in such a minute portion of crimes that it's insignificant anyway. This thing, I wish I had more information about it. NRA ILA has it on their website if you want to pull it down. NRAILA.com, or go to the NRA website, NRA.com, and punch up ILA. You will discover about as much details as I have. Nobody knows how it's going to be enforced yet. Oh, this was the note I had. When Lenny was talking earlier about the Cook County Violence Task Force reported this week with, this is just a few days ago, with 2 weeks still left in the year, Chicago has already reported a total of 4,204 Chicagoans have been shot in 2016. The number of murders is at a murder with firearms. They have lots of murders they don't count. The number of murders by firearms is a staggering 760 people killed by murdering them with a gun. They have gun registration.
Well, they have one of the toughest gun registration, gun background checks, gun laws, gun permit laws. It was just less than 2 years ago that they finally allowed to have CCWs in the state of Illinois. This is one of the toughest places in the world. Now, I've done a lot of research lately, try to figure out, know thy enemy, and the anti-gun Bloomberg-backed people. They have just basically said, well, these guns are all coming in illegally from from Indiana and outside states. People are bringing them in illegally. Well, the reason they're doing that, and we've talked about this on the show before, is that they're allowing their prosecutions for straw purchases and illegal. When they get these guys, and they get them a lot, it's staggering how many they don't prosecute. And that's the biggest problem. I think in 2014, there were 77,000 cases of straw purchases reported to the Federal Department of Justice. There were slightly over 7,000 of them that were prosecuted in the country. So less than 10% were prosecuted. I'm not saying we need to throw everybody in jail, but there was a young man, and he was, I can't remember. I don't believe he was in Chicago. He was somewhere in the Midwest in a major city. I want to say Detroit, but I'm not 100% sure. He had sold 55 straw purchased guns. He was arrested for it. He came to sentencing. The judge gave him a year in jail. And those 55 guns had been given to criminals, people who were not allowed by law to own those guns. That guy should have been under the prison. And you cannot have, I know people say, well, we have to have, we have to have sensible sentencing. Look, when you're selling, you get caught selling 55 guns, and that's the ones you got caught doing a straw purchase with, you need to go to prison. And you need to go to prison for a long time. Which number 11 on our list is right into there. But, folks, unless you enforce the law, you are going to have people you're always going to have rogue individuals. You're always going to have criminals. I don't care what society you have, you're going to have somebody who's going to be an evil, bad guy. You deal with this. It's not, you can't put them in timeout. You can't
catch and release.
You can't catch and release. You can't send them to an encounter group. You have to jail them and prosecute them and jail them. If you don't enforce the law is not law. It has no teeth in it. And if you can't enforce the law, you're not going to get, you're never going to stop this. And Chicago is, oh my God, heaven forbid that we, go out and get, the problem that the mayor of Chicago has, in my humble personal opinion, is the fact that he has hamstrung the police to the point where they are not being proactive, because they've gotten so many protests from, oh, well, these people are being evil in the neighborhood. Well, you know what? They're being evil to the people who are evil in the neighborhood. There was a guy who shot a kid, had a knife. It was a bad shoot. You're always going to have that. But for every one of those, there's 10,000 enforcement actions that are done properly within policy and the law. And you can't dismiss those 10,000 proper arrests and proper use of the law and application of policy and use of force by one idiot.
That's the problem. When somebody does something stupid with a gun, the left attacks all gun owners. But if an immigrant does something stupid, immigrants are all okay. It was just one individual. This number 11 he was talking about just caught my eye because they were on the same page, and this is a political thing, not a gun thing really. But it just caught my eye because in the publication I was reading, they were on the same page. The first story said our President Obama pardoned 78 people today, last Monday, and commuted 153 sentences of other prisoners, the most ever granted in one day by a U.S. president. 178 pardoned and 153 their sentences commuted or eliminated. The second story right next to it was President Obama had warned Mr. Trump not to overuse executive orders.
And
put your own punchline.
Yeah, and one of those 153 sentences that were commuted, I looked at the case. The individual was doing like 20 years because he was selling crack cocaine, and he had multiple illegal weapons to enforce his cocaine trafficking. And he was commuted to time served. He served about 5 years. Those are the kind of people that spill death and destruction on the people who are in their neighborhoods. And when you take him out, you put him away. Well, when you're saying, oh, well, it was just a harmless drug crime. Okay, I spent 31 years in that business. There's no such thing as a harmless drug crime. I talked to a young man one time, and he said, well, I smoke a little bit of weed, and I don't hurt anybody, and my dealer doesn't hurt anybody, and they're not that kind of way. And I said, you may not hurt anybody, your dealer may not hurt anybody, but for that marijuana to get into this country, somebody got hurt. Yeah. And when you look at law enforcement in Mexico, and you look at the way that Mexico's turned into a narco state, when you wake up in the morning and there's headless bodies stacked like cordwood on a soccer field, at the end of the day, that country is almost out of control. And if we don't do something here about it, it's going to be the same way. I'll step off my soapbox now.
Okay. Well, I get a marijuana story here, but one other thing I want to report while we're talking about gun laws. Because of a lawsuit, the Nebraska Supreme Court clarified their existing law regarding concealed carry in cars by non-permit holders. As locals know here in Nevada, you're allowed to carry a gun in your car without restriction. You can't have it on your person in the car without a permit, but you may carry a handgun in your car in Nevada, in any case, without permit. But they ruled that the gun must be stowed in a location that is, quote, completely unavailable to the driver at all times. Under existing law, this is Nebraska. Under existing law, concealed carry permit holders may carry a gun in their car. However, non-permit holders must lock up any firearms so they're not within immediate physical reach of the driver. That was the ruling in the case. And then the Supreme Court in Nebraska added one more line on their own that wasn't even asked for. Nevada Side Court took this further step, outlining that these guns must be inaccessible even while the vehicle is stopped. Inaccessible. So much for having a gun in your car in Nebraska. It will be useless if somebody tries to carjack you. That's Nebraska Supreme Court, so that's the end of that. There ain't no higher court to go to. Here's let me find if I can find my marijuana guy. While we were talking about that, it's number 5. This is from the Glasgow Daily Times on the 15th of December this year, Glasgow, Tennessee, not Glasgow, Scotland. According to the Glasgow Police Department, a homeowner reported that a man had attempted to kick in his front door of his residence just after 10 in the morning. The resident is a house off of Kershill Lane, fired multiple shots from a handgun at the intruder and another male intruder that fled. There were 2 of them. The 20-year-old suspect from Glasgow was arrested after officers responded to the call. Searching the area, the police officers found a vehicle belonging to the suspect parked with the lights on. It had been there all night. Then they found the guy hiding in a closet inside another house that was 2 doors away. So instead of going back to his car, figuring the police would be waiting, I guess, he broke into a different house that was apparently unoccupied. The officers found a shoe print on the front door of the first victim's home when the guy kicked it in, on the door, and a muddy area near the crime scene where the shoes the suspect was wearing. So he took off his shoes so they couldn't match to the print on the door. So he's barefoot in the other house. He was 20 years old. He also had a small amount of marijuana in his pocket. He's charged with 2nd-degree burglary, 3rd-degree criminal mischief, and possession of marijuana, and was transported to the local county lockup. The suspect was not struck by any of the shots fired at him by the homeowner. So a couple of things here that mattered, that really caught my attention. He gets into another home that apparently was unoccupied in order to hide from the police. No burglar alarm, obviously, or anything to prevent that. There wasn't any information on whether there was anybody in that home or not. Apparently not. When the cops come sliding in your neighborhood, sirens blaring, responding to you don't know what, instead of running outside to see what's going on, you might make sure your house is locked up, because they're obviously coming in that fast because somebody may be running to try and hide from them. And just a note to the criminal, I feel sorry for the mentally challenged. If you're doing a home invasion, it wasn't really smart to carry your drug stash with you. It works for the DA to, he can add a few extra charges on, but why would you carry your drugs
Well,
while
he's
you're
certainly
doing a home invasion?
he's certainly not a candidate for a job at NASA, but you know, I mean, it's ridiculous.
Probably doesn't have a PhD. There was a gun accident here I want to talk about. Well, I have time to, and this is something we all worry about, and it's something the left uses to beat us with, and so it's kind of a gun safety story. This is from the Chattanoogan.com. It's in Chattanooga, Tennessee. Reported on the 17th and that's spelled right. You go ahead and pronounce it for me. Ooltewah, Tennessee. At approximately 4:20 a.m., the Hamilton County Sheriff's Office responded to a house on Blanche Road for a report of a person shot. 4:20 in the morning. When authorities arrived, it was found that the husband had been sleeping in the bedroom and was awakened by his wife, who had been downstairs working in the kitchen. When the wife returned to the bedroom, the husband awoke. He was startled and accidentally fired his gun, believing she was an intruder. The bullet grazed the wife's ear, caused no serious injury. She was taken to the hospital and they fixed it. A lot of things going wrong here. This is really lucky for the resident, considering what could have gone wrong. This couple has been married basically forever. They didn't put their ages, but they're described as elderly and been married for 40-some years. I always suggest to people that if you believe there's an intruder in your home, that you use a loud verbal warning. You know, get out of my house, I've got a gun, or who's there, or something. When I do that, I've taken some flack by readers on my blog that say that will give the real burglar your location in the house. Probably will. Each situation is different on its own details, obviously. Being half asleep and drawing your gun at an unknown target with your finger on the trigger, which is apparently what happened here. The husband clearly didn't have a viable target and apparently had his finger on the trigger. This is an unintentional firing by all accounts, all of the newspaper, all the police reports. He simply was startled and picked up the gun with his finger on the trigger and it went off. You need to take a moment to recognize that you are fully awake, cognizant of the situation, then put your finger on the trigger. I will accept the argument that occasionally it's not smart to give a loud verbal warning, but then don't have your finger on the trigger when you're not fully awake. The right answer for this will depend on the layout of the house and so forth and so on. But
well, I happen to be one of the people that agree with you that if I'm in a situation and I'm in the house, I'm going to tell somebody, and I'm going to say, who the hell is there? And if it's my wife, she's going to go, well, I don't have one, but if I did, she'd go, hey, it's me, don't shoot.
She did. She left.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah. But the reality of it is, I was 31 years in law enforcement. I've never heard of a case where you tell a burglar, hey, I'm in here, I've got a gun, and if you come in here, I am going to shoot you. I've never heard of a burglar come in the door going, oh, I don't believe you've got a gun. Most of the time, they haul ass and get out of the house because they don't want to go in some place that's got an armed homeowner.
Remember, we did a story, I know you were on the show 2 or 3 weeks ago, where a guy, this is young guys, they're in their 20s, and one of them had left the house, and he came back to the house and decided to sneak in and scare his friend.
Yeah.
And came around the corner going, ah! And the guy was coming down the hall the other way and shot him. Coming in to surprise your friend and not announcing that you're there. That was in the middle of the night again. Safety rule, finger off trigger. You don't put your finger on the trigger till you have a target, and it's a viable target. And I'm glad Lenny agrees with me. The warnings are appropriate. Yes, there is the occasional case where the burglar now knows where you are and he still continues forward to attack you. It can happen and it has happened. It is incredibly rare. Play the odds, give a warning, and listen for the footsteps leaving. Don't go chase him. Call 911 and sit in your room with your gun until the police arrive.
I tell people all the time, if you're at home in the middle of the night and you hear somebody breaking something or something on in your house, unless you've got small children or family members that you've got to go and protect, don't leave your bedroom. Is your TV set really worth getting shot for or getting killed? You don't clear your house. I don't care how many firearms training organizations and businesses say, oh, I can train you to shoot as well as any SWAT team or Navy SEAL, and in an hour and a half can train you to clear a house by yourself, which is, as they say, bovine feces. Make them come through the door. That's called the fatal funnel. One of the things that we teach law enforcement when I teach a tactical class is to get through that doorway, because that is the fatal funnel. That's where you're the most congested in trying to get into that room. And if you linger there, you will die.
We've got a couple of end things here. Next week, we're back from 5 to 6 here on KSHP 1400 AM, probably at that time slot. As again, it might be changed. My guess that next week is Firearm Instructor Maggie Mordaunt, known as CCW Maggie. Lots of things to talk about, some new training issues, and we'll have a lot more on these magazine things. She'll be here. We'll be here next week with that. I started down my list of upcoming gun shows. I apologize, didn't get it completed. The next show is January 7 and 8 at the Orleans Hotel. New Orleans, it's not. It's the Orleans Hotel. January 7th and 8th, Saturday and Sunday, and then there's the antique show on the 20th and 22nd. I'll get you caught up on those. The next show is January 7 at the Orleans. I don't have the admission. I haven't talked to them at passes and stuff yet. I just got so far behind that this week that it was chasing my tail. Let's see if I got
maybe
one more thing.
Oh, okay.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, maybe you want to give the folks, at least the Nevada folks here, an update on the debacle that question one is.
Yeah, question one, the ballot initiative that says we're going to start doing background checks for civilians, and they're going to be free. There has been no resolution of that whatsoever. The petition said we're going to run direct to NICS. We cannot run direct to NICS. That's a computer program. It says we will not call this criminal history repository to do the background check, and we will not charge for it, or the state won't charge for it, that is. We can't not call because that's what the law is now. And right now, ATF has given us the information that when the two guys come in, we take the gun, we are to log that gun into our acquisition book of our license. Therefore, when we give it back to the new guy after he passes the background check, which we don't know who we're calling to get that yet, and don't charge him, which we don't know about that yet either. We then log it out to him. There's a hole in the system because we're also required by the state when a gun comes into our inventory that we run it to see if it's stolen. The sales tax department steps in and says if it's coming out of our books, which it is, because ATF says we're taking possession of it and logging it in. then it's a taxable sale going back out over the counter. I know that's unfair. I agree. The way it is right now, we just can't do them. I don't know how any dealers in Nevada on the 1st are going to comply with this referendum. And the legislature doesn't start till February, so we're in limbo for a month.
And my question to you is, if say a dealer takes it in, and then here in Clark County, you have to wait 30 days before you can sell a used gun. So
Yes.
in that 30-day period, if say the seller of the gun decides to back out, that's your gun, right? It's no longer the guy that owns it.
Yeah, we have to background check him to get his own gun back. And that's the nightmare is he fails too.
Right. Well, or here's the problem too. What if you were literally that becomes your property, correct? As a gun dealer?
Well, we have to hold it, and we can't give it back to the guy that gave it to us. We're not going to give it to the guy who's trying to buy it if he got delayed or walked away from the deal. The way it's worded, whatever we do is wrong. We can choose to violate state law, or we can choose to violate federal law. Another dealer and I were interviewed by the RJ a couple weeks ago on this very issue, and he was going to violate state law because the feds can take his license. Well, we have state licenses too, of course. I'm going to violate the federal law because they have nicer jails.
The food's better in the law.
Basically, what's going to happen, you're going to discover on January 1 that you're required to do a background check. They think if the petition that was put in is legal, and no dealers are doing them. And Metro certainly isn't going to do them. So I don't know how that's going to work. It may just stop all gun transfers in Nevada until they get it straightened out, because you can't do one without a background check, and we don't know how to check them.
It's a well-intentioned mess.
It's a well-intentioned law that there's nowhere to go with it. I'm sure this assembly will straighten it out. We are up at 6 o'clock, so we're on the clock. I thank you all for listening in. I hopefully will have some further information on the bill drafts for the magazine capacity. That pretty much is gone in Nevada. It is my opinion, and also the sheriff's opinion. His counts way more than mine on that one. What we're going to do with the background checks, we may have some application next week. And for all you folks in California, we will have a clarification, hopefully, on this magazine ban, because you're all going to become criminals. It looks to me like on January 1. And we've got a show between then and now. We got one on the 29th. So you may have time to smash your magazines with a sledgehammer or
send them to Lenny Davis, care of.
Yeah, send them to Lenny Davis, care of the gun store.
Yeah.
I'll give them right to you.
I'm sure you will.
Thank you very much for tuning in. We will be back next week. Thank you, Lenny, one more time.
Sir.
And I'm waiting for